horror. Journal of a Moving Picture. Blood and Feathers. A chicken suddenly appeared in the basement near all those strange devices. We chased it up and down the tower until finally Elaine caught it and, grabbing the bird by the legs, continuously pummeled it against the stone floor until the whole room filled with blood, feathers, and screams. She seemed a little disturbed by her sudden loss of control. We all were. With the torn chicken legs still in her hands, she kept on mumbling repeatedly that she's usually quite patient and in control, and for the life of her, she did not understand the emotions that had suddenly and temporarily hijacked her. We consoled poor Elaine as we gathered the chunks of poultry and prepared a delicious meal. A good scene to include in the picture for levity. Journal of a Moving Picture. Never forgotten. Elaine Fairfield told me how she met Ama Kumura in the parks. They met in a group dedicated to finding missing loved ones, led by a brother who had lost his sister while investigating strange yet similar disappearances. The group eventually figured out a way to enter this cosmic hell with the brother's research, but were somehow separated along the way. She says they were attacked by a creature she couldn't really describe, but it seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I didn't really understand what she was going on about. Whatever it was, I'm glad they found me and pulled me out of the bear trap when they did. I'm also glad the brother entrusted Mr. Park with the research before they were separated. And I hope there's something in there that will help us return home. Otherwise, we'll probably end up doing to each other what Elaine did to that poor chicken. On that note, Yasmin Kassir didn't find the chicken incident very funny, nor did she think it would make a good scene in a movie picture. I'm not sure she represents the target audience I'm after.
Dear Jake, I sit before my journal and don't know what to write. I would like to continue searching the fog for you, but Bridget feels we need to rest, and that there is much we can learn from the previous occupant of this tower. I suppose the only thing I can do now is float with the tide and hope we find something here that brings us closer to the ones we've lost. A few of us gathered around a small fire in the study and told stories about loved ones we've all heard 100 times but acted like it's the first time. I suppose that's because we know it helps to talk, laugh, and remember the good times. Ama told us about her little girl building motorcycle engines, upgrading scooters and racing them in her small village. This version was a little more embellished than the last. No one can be that good on a scooter, even if it had been modified or upgraded with plane parts. Nevertheless, they were amusing stories, and she told them well, up until the moment she stopped abruptly, staring blankly at the fire, lost in a memory. No one said anything for a long while. I stared at the leaping flames and thought of the time you first learned to ride a bicycle. You were 4 years old, and the first thing I taught you was how to fall. I told you to push yourself with your feet and fall safely to the left or right side. We practiced falling safely until the fear of falling was gone. Then I showed you how to pedal fast and use the speed to keep your balance. You succeeded on your first try because you were no longer scared of falling. You were so happy you jumped off your bike, hugged me, and told me I was the best dad in the world. If I were to die today and live in that moment forever, I would be a blessed man. I miss you with all my heart and hate what happened between us. I only hope for another chance to make things right.
Chamber of Blood. Day of Night. Jaden, 1. 23-year-old Jaden pushed through the fog as he approached the entrance of an abandoned motel. He wiped the cold sweat from his brow, opened the creaking door, and entered the dark lobby. At once his heart sank as he stared upon a grim scene of death. Strewn across the floor were human corpses and the decaying remains of squid-like creatures, unlike anything he had ever seen before. He took a moment to compose himself. His bruised face, swollen feet, and tattered clothes gave testament to the long and arduous journey through this dark dimension to find his adopted sister, Haley. Back home, he had connected with others who had lost loved ones in similar circumstances, and together they had collected relics and artifacts with secret symbols that eventually helped them open a portal into this world made of nightmares. But no sooner had they entered the nightmare than they had been separated while being attacked by a shadow creature with an insatiable appetite for darkness. Now Jaden was alone. Without the research, or the codex as some of them had grown accustomed to calling it, he wasn't sure how he would escape when he found his sister. But he tried not to think about his predicament as he entered the lobby, feeling like something or someone was watching him. Some distance away, he had found the ruins of a tower with skeletons strewn across a mini-putt with an old French song playing on a scratchy gramophone. Now, he was in an abandoned motel, reeking dead creatures around him. He didn't know what else to expect, but he was sure of one thing. More deadly creatures and mysterious ruins would be in the fog. Much more. Everything he had discovered about this world suggested it was a garden of infinite darkness beyond time and space. Death, he had read, was not an escape. Cautiously, Jaden walked down a deathly silent corridor with shaking hands towards a door. Above the door, an exit sign blinked in and out of existence. The only sign of life was a rat the size of a dog chewing on the putrid flesh of one of the bloated squid creatures. As he passed a pile of bodies, he felt something behind him. He turned to see a sudden flash. An instant later, he was staring down the edge of a gleaming katana. He gasped as he found himself staring at a woman in a red and black kimono. She reminded him of a protagonist in a story Haley had been collecting by an anonymous 18th century Japanese author. "Saku, wait!" Jaden's heart gave a great leap as he instantly recognized Surin's voice. He turned to see several other familiar faces amongst a small group of survivors. Beyond the faces, he recognized Olivia, Sean, and Elias. He thought he saw Haley's estranged uncle, Mahan, in blood-stained fatigues, carrying a semi-automatic rifle. Surin urgently turned to face a woman beside him, Ariella. He said, "Tell Saku we know him. His name is Jaden. He came with us through the portal. We got separated. This place, it has his sister." Ariella nodded, then gently placed her hand on Saku's wrist, translating Surin's words into Japanese. Within moments, Saku nodded her understanding and lowered her katana. Jaden breathed again as Surin tossed him a rifle and a rusty machete, then introduced him to the new members of the group and told everyone to prepare for another assault from the fog. An instant later, they dispersed to barricade and fortify the motel. Journal of a Moving Picture. Entry 89. Started writing early in the morning. 2 pages completed. Focused on the chicken episode, which entertains in a number of ways. Discussion with Yasmin is planned for tonight and will likely miss Elaine's reading of a story chosen from the Chamber of Blood. Something wicked this Halloween. Elaine claims the story is set in a world not unlike this one. chamber of blood, lost and forgotten. A reverberating explosion somewhere in the distance roused the 5 prisoners in their small, muddy, vermin-infested dungeon. One bearded prisoner sat up and stared at several names etched in a rock by the door. It read, Amar Singh, 1914, Adama Komba, 1915, Omar Halimi, 1916, Amrik, 1917, Roop, 1917. The prisoner had the sudden instinct to etch his own name, lest he be forgotten. And so he grabbed a small, sharp stone, and just as he began to etch out his name, the thick wooden door slammed open, and enemy soldiers shouted curses at the 5 prisoners in a language none of them understood while threatening them with gleaming bayonets. The enemy soldiers gestured for them to stand, then ushered the 5 prisoners out of the darkness and into the golden light of dawn through a muddy 6-foot trench reeking of death. As the prisoners hobbled toward a clearing, one soldier addressed them in broken English, telling them they had the honor of helping their captain and perhaps avoiding early morning target practice. The 5 prisoners stood by the trench wall as an enemy soldier balanced tin cans over their heads. A translator approached them with the captain. The captain spoke, and the translator quickly interpreted, saying, "One of you bastards will tell me about your secret mission. Speak up, and I promise to send you to a proper camp where you'll be fed and given immediate medical attention." None of the 5 responded. The captain smirked, took 20 paces back, cocked his rifle, aimed, and hit one soldier in the forehead, splitting his skull in 2, sending a spray of blood across the other 4. The captain regarded them, hesitated, then cocked the rifle again. A sudden crack, and another prisoner fell as the captain mockingly apologized for his terrible aim. With a laugh, the captain aimed the rifle, squeezed the trigger, and hit the tin can off the next prisoner. The can fell against the sandbags lining the trench. The captain prepared his rifle and shifted his aim to the next prisoner. The prisoner stared at the rifle, closed his eyes, and repeated a phrase in an unknown language that resembled Latin. And just as the captain made to pull the trigger, a sudden, piercing whistle suddenly caught everyone's attention. By the time the captain looked up, it was already too late, and he was reduced to fleshy fragments and bone shrapnel by an 18-pounder. The bearded prisoner crawled on the ground toward a trembling hand sticking out of a pile of debris. He frantically dug through the dirt and rubble as muffled screams and explosions filled his ears. Breathing hard, he managed to dig out one face and then another. Then he rose on shaking legs, grabbed one prisoner by the uniform, and pulled him to his feet. Together they yanked the other prisoner from the mountain of rubble and took a moment to gather themselves. Limping and coughing, they grabbed rifles from the ground, rushed towards a ladder, and climbed over the trench and into the barren wasteland. Leaping over decomposing horses, the fleeing prisoners fell into a massive crater as bullets thumped in the mud all around them. As they desperately scrambled out, jumping over bodies and rats and pushing through clouds of flies, they suddenly and unexpectedly entered a maze of barbed wire attached to the scorched remains of trees. Pushing their way out of the maze, they once again entered a clearing and sprinted away without looking back until they heard the rumble of an engine in the sky. They turned to see the plane. One prisoner froze, grabbed his rifle, and aimed as the plane approached them. Holding his breath, he pulled the trigger. Large crows took flight from corpses. The bullets screamed through the air and missed. He cocked the rifle again, calmed his nerves, and, waiting for the right moment, squeezed the trigger. This time, the bullet howled through the sky and hammered straight through the pilot's hardened face. A moment later, the plane rose, then span wildly out of control. The prisoners watched in disbelief as the plane crashed into their pursuers, crushing and cutting and burning them up in a swirling ball of fire. As they took in the grisly scene, the world seemed to tremble violently, and the ground beneath their feet instantly disappeared. The 3 prisoners fell, arms flailing, into a massive sinkhole as dust, soot, and barbed wire covered them. When the dust settled, the 3 prisoners surveyed their surroundings to discover they were in an ancient temple immersed in a strange black fog. Arcane symbols were etched into the surrounding walls. Their secret mission was a success. They had discovered the lost temple. Now, all they had to do was report their discovery to the newly formed Intelligence Division. And so the prisoners desperately climbed out and found themselves in familiar, yet unfamiliar territory. The bleak, body-ridden landscape seemed like no man's land, but there was something strange about the scene. All around were maze-like walls of barbed wire and scorched trees where bodies dangled from hooks that glistened red under a hunter's moon. Each prisoner stared at the bodies and the hooks, confused, each wondering if they had been there before. The sudden high-pitched buzz of a chainsaw startled the prisoners, and they instinctively took cover beside a burning tank. As a cloud of heaving black fog approached them, they knew something was different with the hell they had grown accustomed to for the last 3 years. They sensed that they had somehow discovered something lost and forgotten to time in the hidden temple, or that this lost and forgotten thing had somehow discovered them. And that this thing, this ancient thing, whatever it was, had pushed them out of the frying pan and into the cosmic fire. Chamber Blood. Office of Strategic Magic. Memo. Concerning Dr. Stomper, we are concerned about having Stomper lead Subproject 774. He openly mocks the premise of herd manifestation, and his suggestions for the community have an air of skepticism, if not sarcasm. He continues to question the department and doesn't believe the government has the resources to conduct such an experiment. He requests to know where the funding is coming from and asks too many questions. I don't believe he's the right candidate to lead the herd initiative.